everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Heartbeats of Adapted PE podcast. My name is Jen Hebink. I'll be your host today. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to pop to the beginning of my slides as we do this intro here. My name is Jen Hebink. I am an adapted PE teacher out of Minnesota in Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis, about 40 minutes in Buffalo, Minnesota. I teach full-time at the secondary level. So I am grades 6 through 12. And I am also the Shape America National Adapted PE Teacher of the Year from 2022, Central District Teacher of the Year 2022, and the MinShape Teacher of the Year for Adapted PE in 2020. So when the pandemic was falling apart, the world was falling apart, I had just a little piece of that joy to kind of hang on to, and it's really brought me into this space of where I am today with this podcast. So thank you for joining us today. We've titled this podcast kind of Back to School, and we're going to be hitting on some advocacy and hacks today as you head back into your school year. And we have some special people to join us, which I'll introduce in a few minutes. But first, I want to share about the mission and vision of the Heartbeats of Adapted PE podcast. The mission is to connect, inspire, and amplify adapted PE teacher voices and those who support all students. That includes higher ed and retired teachers, as you have joined us today, our guests. I'll give you a little clue there. And then our vision is to celebrate the heart, which is the storytelling. You know, teachers, we have stories, we have things that we've gone through, the ups and downs of teaching, and like things in our personal life that have really shaped who we are today. And sometimes we get into that. And then we're also going to celebrate the beat, or what I call the daily rhythm of our essential field. And we are a podcast that is released one time per month. And because I'm a teacher, I never know what day it's going to be until I get my guest scheduled. And that day is today for August. So again, one time per month, not for profit podcast. That is a tongue twister, let me tell you, not for profit podcast. And so I love the name Heartbeats because it just brings not only our passion into the mix, but also what we love doing every day, which is being with our students or supporting all students. I also want to say thank you because Pam at Fit and Fun Playscapes has allowed us to be able to go forward with all these episodes. So you can find Fit and Fun Playscapes at Fit and Play on X, at Fit and Fun Play on X. And they have wonderful tools for supporting all students. And we've had Pam on the podcast before, and she's just a wonderful human being. So go ahead and check them out. And they are the reason why we can have so many of these episodes all year round. With that, I am going to introduce our guests for today. The first one is Mr. Garth Tymeson. And he is a person who I tell people I never had for a teacher, but I wish I had. And I'm still learning from Garth today. And then I'm also going to add Mr. Brock McMullen. And there you are. Welcome to the podcast, guys. How are we doing?
Doing good. Thanks, Jen.
Good. So I want to start with a question for both of you. I'm going to start with Garth. Garth, what's your background? Where are you at? What's the latest? And kind of your teaching background too.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, my background, I'm an adapted physical education and special education person through and through. Plus, my wife was an adapted physical education full-time itinerant for about 27 years. I grew up in upstate New York, in Troy, New York, outside of Albany. Went to a 2-year school to start my academic career, and then completed my BS degree at SUNY Cortland. That's where I got my first taste of adapted physical education, thank goodness. Then went to SUNY Brockport for my master's. Taught adapted PE in the Rochester, New York area. Went down to Texas Women's University for my doctoral work in adapted physical education, and where I met my wife. and then progressed to my first higher education job was at Northern Illinois University, and then went to UW La Crosse. And at those stops at NIU outside of Chicago and UW La Crosse, I heavily involved in OSEP personnel development grants for adapted physical education teachers. And now I'm retired, and every day is a Saturday for me, except
Love it.
I still consult with higher education faculty members and universities regarding adapted physical education OSEP grants. I do a lot of advocacy with parents and teachers throughout the country. I'm actually been involved with some state level IDEA special education complaints related to adapted physical education that maybe I might be able to bring up. And believe it or not, I'm a school bus driver here in my local school district.
Man.
I'm
Awesome.
a golf course starter and ranger, and I'm a very proud grandpa now. And we do a lot of traveling. I play a lot of golf. I do a lot of biking, and of course some pickleball.
I love it. You're always sending me pictures of what you're up to. And for those of you who have never met Garth before, he's basically an adapted PE legend because of just all the amazing work that he does. So let's turn it to Brock. Brock, tell us about your background. How did you land at UW La Crosse?
Well, I went to UW La Crosse as an undergraduate student, and that's actually where I had the opportunity to have Garth as one of my teachers. And I actually had him for probably 3 or 4 classes, if I'm counting correctly. And so that's what's kind of unique about this story, and then this opportunity here is it kind of comes full circle. Is I've known Garth, as a teacher since about 2008 to 2009, and now I consider him a very close friend and a colleague. But anyways, graduated from La Crosse, and that was where I got my first taste of working with kids with disabilities, because my time in high school, K-12 schooling, I did not have much of any interaction with kids with disabilities. And it was during one of our on-campus programs that got me interested in working with students with disabilities in physical education. So an adapted PE before that was a term that I would have to look up in the dictionary to know and understand. So with that being said, I graduated from La Crosse, and Garth was able to connect me with a colleague and a friend of his out in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I had the opportunity to go to graduate school at the University of Utah. But also while I was out there doing my schooling for graduate studies, I had the opportunity to work and teach both general and adapted physical education out in the Salt Lake area schools. So anyways, I was out there for several years, did my master's and PhD work. And then when the time was coming for that schooling to be done, as a PhD student, you're open to moving anywhere in the country. And so you're applying for any job that's open. Doesn't matter what state or what location it's in, you just want that job. But it just so happened that as I was applying, there was a job here opened up at UW La Crosse. I had the opportunity to apply and interview and was offered the position. And again, it just so happened that Garth was going out of his time in higher education and retiring. And so it worked that I was able to fill in his shoes and move in as a first-year faculty member as the director of a Office of Special Education Personnel Development Grants, control our graduate program in adapted PE, work with our undergraduate program in adapted PE, which is a lot to handle if anybody's familiar with higher education workloads as a first-year faculty member. But yeah, since then, we've been successful in obtaining another grant from the Department of Education for personal preparation in adapted physical education. And so I'm continuing to do that as part of my role. I also direct our undergraduate physical adapted and school health education program. And then in the last several years, I've actually been doing a lot more work with kind of consulting and working with local school districts in La Crosse and around the state, ensuring that they're providing and giving, best practices in the area of adapted physical education.
You are also a legend. Oh my gosh, you guys are so. Look, I didn't even know all that back. Like, I knew some, right? I knew you guys were awesome, but like all the work that you have, like I just think of all that your work that you're doing, and it's really going to just make waves. And Garth, you've seen the waves come like through your career of how things can get better when you advocate. So I just thank you guys for bringing all that you have done to this profession, because it definitely makes not only adapted PE teachers' lives more organized and complete and knowledgeable and wisdom in our area, but also those general PE teachers that just don't know what to do next, or how do I advocate, or what do I need for students with disabilities. And I think that's why we're here in this podcast. We're all here to kind of put a little piece into the world to help each other. So I'm going to bring us all three together like so we can kind of see each other better. But I'm going to start with Brock, or not with Brock, with Garth. Garth, I asked the question, one of the first questions I always ask people when they're going to be coming onto the podcast: what are you passionate about? And not only preparing maybe teaching students with disabilities, but also future teachers, because you did have that job in the past. So tell me what you're passionate about.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jen, for inviting us for the podcast. I've listened to the first several podcasts that you've done, and they've been fantastic tools and hacks, and a whole lot of advocacy for adapted physical education teachers. And also, need to know, Brock has more than filled the shoes. More than filled the shoes.
Way to go, Brock.
Thank you.
As you mentioned, Jen, I'm more than passionate about just teaching. It's a lot about advocacy also, and I'll kind of talk about how that has evolved. There's no doubt that adapted PE teachers and higher education faculty, must be strong, persistent, smart, and knowledgeable advocates. Part of the knowledge base for adapted physical education professionals is a complete understanding of IDEA, specifically the PE requirements, and how those requirements fit into the special education and IEP process. That's a lot. That's well beyond your typical physical education teacher preparation. This advocacy role is often, it's a role with many constituents. It's parents, it's administrators, it's related service staff. I got to tell you, I'll throw it all right back to a coaching physical education analogy. I compare it to coaching and knowledge necessary to work at different levels. So, for example, if I'm coaching a T-ball team or a little league team, it's enough to generally know how many innings, how many outs there are, and what base I should run to. But advancing, if I'm working with high school or college athletes or the advanced, I need to know cutoffs, relays, pickoffs, backup plays, bunt defense, first and third steal plays, etc. Okay, so I look at it as advanced work, all of this advocacy that takes place. And adapted physical education people, whether they're K-12 or whether they're higher education folks, they need to really be up on that knowledge. And hopefully today we're going to give you some practical tools or hacks that you can use. You might be going back to school and you might be setting yourself a goal. I want to serve maybe different kids. I want to serve maybe different age levels that I know I should be, but I haven't been doing it. And so hopefully we can provide you with some tools. My serious advocacy role and work evolved with my work with the National Consortium on Physical Education for Individuals with Disabilities. Back in the early 2000s, I was co-chair of the advocacy committee with Dr. Bob Arnhold at Slippery Rock University. I just continued my work in advocacy after that. And I encourage everyone, obviously, to join NICPED. My understanding and my feel is that adapted PE teachers have to be strong advocates. Okay.
I agree with you, because I look back at my career. I've been teaching now for 15 years, and I feel like I'm no longer a rookie teacher, but I'm also a teacher that can't say I've been teaching 20 to 25 years. Like, I feel like I'm right in between this zone. And I feel like the area that I have had to grow the most is my advocacy. Mm-hmm. What do I say? How do I approach my admin? How do I approach my team? How do I approach parents who maybe don't agree with me? How do I have that happy face, but also know the law, right? Yeah. So here's a follow-up question, because I know we've mentioned this just briefly. Can you define OSEP for us? What is OSEP? OSEP.
Sure. Yep, you hear it a lot. And Brock and I both even used it in our introductions, okay? OSEP stands for the Office of Special Education Programs. And it's part of the U.S. Department of Education, a federal agency. OSEP is very active, and it monitors all states for implementation of IDEA required special education. They will often, school districts will send reports to OSEP, and based on all of that data, OSEP actually sends report cards to to state departments of education throughout the country. And so OSEP really closely monitors, okay, all of the special education that takes place. It's also the agency that writes oftentimes interpretations or guidance for state departments of education and all school districts within the states that are involved. And those things are oftentimes called Dear Colleague letters, or your typical FAQs, or letters of clarification. And so there's a difference. Oftentimes people will call all of this letters, Dear Colleague letters. It's different, okay? Dear Colleague letters are different from letters of policy clarification. And today's session is a perfect follow-up to your last podcast with Heidi Ambrosius from California, since she presented on preschool adaptive PE services and mentioned an OSEP letter of policy clarification related to that age group. Heidi's work and the use of the preschool adapted PE letter of clarification is a wonderful example of how and why these letters are obtained, and how these letters of clarification are frequently used around the country. Okay. And remember now, these letters of policy clarification apply to all states in the country. These letters of policy clarification clarify the federal special education law, and so therefore applies to all states and U.S. territories.
Okay? Yeah, so that includes states that don't necessarily have straight up adapted PE teachers, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Now, the difference, a Dear Colleague letter is usually something that OSEP authors and sends out to all state departments of education, and then therefore funnel down to all school districts in every state. They're usually more global, big picture types of Dear Colleague letters. Like there might be a Dear Colleague letter that has been sent out on restraint and seclusion. Maybe there's been one sent out on the use of Braille. Maybe there's been one that has been sent out on positive behavior supports. So Dear Colleague letters are authored by OSEP and sent out to all state departments of education and school districts. Now, a letter of policy clarification that we'll be talking about today is more of an individual response from a person or a group that is really inquiring about something specific, okay? And it can be from a parent, it can be from an advocate, it can be from a lawyer, okay? And it responds to specific situations that are clarified by OSEP. And again, that's what we'll talk about today, because we're talking about these adapted physical education letters. These letters are really important, okay, because they're authored by OSEP's legal department and provide interpretation of what is required by IDEA. They don't create any new legal requirements, okay? But they're written by the same people that write the rules and regulations for IDEA. And so therefore, it's not too smart if you go against a letter of policy clarification, because it's written by the legal people within OSEP, who again are the ones that write the policies and procedures.
Yes. So here we've talked about the importance of these letters. So I'm going to hop to that next question after Garth. How do you determine specific adapted PE topics or issues when requesting the OSEP letters of policy clarification that you've obtained?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just a little bit of background here, okay? As all of us know, prior to IDEA 2004, the wording in the law regarding physical education said that all students with disabilities must receive physical education instruction, ages 3 to 21. Suddenly, when the final rules and regulations came out for IDEA 2004, there was a little bit of a change, but it has a major impact. So instead of saying all children ages 3 to 21 were required to get physical education, it said all children, unless their non-disabled peers at the same grade level, did not receive physical education. Okay? A very, very short phrase, but a phrase that had major implications, because as we all know, at the preschool level, ages 3 to 5, and oftentimes ages 16 to 21, oftentimes there's a lot of different requirements, because generally kids are not receiving physical education services 3 to 21. Then in all sorts of states, you've got different requirements for ages, for high school age, okay? So suddenly, let's say about 2 years after the final rules and regulations were released, I started receiving, and NICPED started receiving, a lot of inquiries from adapted physical education teachers saying, oh, my special ed director said that we didn't need to provide services for ages 3 to 5 because it now has that phrase in the law. Same thing happened at the upper age, 16 to 21. They were saying, well, in the state of so-and-so, there's only 3 semesters that are required for physical education. So my kids with disabilities aren't getting anything besides 1 year of physical education. So we needed to get letters of clarification. And therefore, I went through the process of getting those letters of clarification, crossed my fingers, and when the information came back, we were reinforced, because the Office of Special Education Programs interpreted it just the way that we knew they would. So the bottom line here is you have to be sure that you understand the law. You have these letters of policy clarification. Much of this is right within the final rules and regulations, but it's 400 pages long. Not many people are going to be reading that specificity, okay? And so getting those letters of policy clarification are important. And Jen, we're going through a lot of information. Make sure that your people that are listening to this podcast and watch this podcast know that they can contact me about the very specific page numbers and different things like that. Okay.
Yes. And I do want to point out real quick that we did put the link to all the stuff that you're talking about, all the clarification letters, OSEP, all the things that you sent me in the description of the episode on YouTube. So if you're looking for those resources, and Garth's email and all that is in there.
So again, Jen, one of the main reasons, or why certain topics, it's when a lot of things start rippling up from the field. When adapted PE teachers, parents, and people will start making multiple inquiries, all of a sudden it's kind of like, hey, we need clarification on this. And so in addition, your listeners will find that in addition to the preschool and the secondary level, I have also obtained clarification letters on physical therapy, cannot substitute for physical education, and also the role and the presence of somebody with expertise in adapted physical education doing evaluations and interpreting those evaluations at IEP meetings.
Yes. When I was talking to Heidi, and I bet you probably caught this, Heidi works with a lot of just like reaching out to different school districts across the country. And a lot of them who don't have adapted PE teachers will say, yeah, we're doing this job. We know it's not our job, but we're doing it because we don't have adapted PE. It's the PT, it's the OT, like they're coming together to be like, this isn't our expertise, but we're expected to do it. And I feel like these letters of clarification for those districts would just help them so much.
The bottom line is I didn't get these letters for states like California, right, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Yeah. There's 8 or 10 states that have very, very good teacher certification in adapted PE. It's for all of those other states and districts and parents and teachers that really don't have it and that need this, because let's face it, a special ed administrator will say to you, Jen, oh, come on, Jen, you think everybody should have adapted physical education. That's not true. And they think that we're making some of this stuff up. If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. And so the important thing is getting it in writing, this policy clarification, and then having it available and understanding what it is. Now, understand that OSEP puts out hundreds of these letters of clarification a year. Adapted PE has only had 5 or 6 of these. And in the last 10 years, there's probably been thousands of these letters of policy clarification. Okay. And also, it takes generally 9 to 15 months to get an answer back. The process is generally, I work with parents who have had situations in school districts where they're not getting the services. And so the letters that I send in are usually 2 to 3, 4 pages. It's detailing the specific scenarios, and I'm quoting the law. And I ask OSEP to answer specific questions. And so, it takes a little time to do it. It takes a lot of time to get them back, but it's worth it when these are available to adapted PE teachers and parents and even related service persons.
Yeah. Awesome.
Jen, if I could just hop in here. One thing that's also important about these letters of clarification is, yes, they're used to inform teachers and the adapted physical education teachers about their specific practices. But one thing I think we need to do to advocate for our profession is let our administrators know, because many times, our administrators might come from just a standard history or math background, which again, nothing against those subjects, but oftentimes they don't have the preparation in special education. And even those that do have the preparation in special education oftentimes do not know that adapted PE is a direct service and it's not a related service, and it needs to be provided to those students that need it. And so educating and informing our principals, our administrators at the district level is equally as important as informing and educating our parents.
Yeah, I agree with you. So one thing that I've kind of gathered and learned from other people and people on this podcast too is that sometimes admin don't know until you tell them, but sometimes they need to hear it from other admin. That's the law, And
it's
so the more we
say that. It's very interesting you say that, Jen, because I will talk with teachers about these different situations in different states. And I will often say, hey, let me get your special ed director in contact with a special ed director who has a good adapted PE program in the district, and let them talk to each other in their language.
Yep. Yeah.
And also, in addition to special ed administrators, as Brock has mentioned, I find that, for example, in our states, in Minnesota and Wisconsin, school psychologists really run a lot of the special education show within districts.
And we love them.
Yeah, it's important.
Like what we need, right?
Yeah, it's important that those school psychologists are also educated by adapted PE teachers oftentimes if they don't have that background related to what the law says.
Yes.
And Brock could talk for 3 years about that.
Speaking of Brock, we're going to move into kind of more time with Brock. Garth, thank you so much for sharing all about the OSEP stuff. I just think, and Brock and you and Brock both do so much with higher ed, but also like educating us and educating everybody. I just think that's such an important piece to know the law, know the advocacy pieces. But I kind of want to talk to Brock a little bit about what he's passionate about, because I always lead off, like I said, with Garth. What are you passionate about? I want you to bring to this podcast what you are passionate about. So, Brock, share a little bit about the passion that kind of stokes your fire, as some of our friends would say.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll definitely say is preparing teachers. And that is one of the biggest joys and senses of gratitude that I get during my time here in higher education, because, I, just as Garth did for a number of years, I get to work with both undergraduate students that are in their first or second year of college, with the introduction to adapted PE class. But then I also teach and direct our graduate adapted PE program. So I'm working with students that have maybe never worked or interacted with a kid with a disability before, to those that are coming here for further education after already obtaining a bachelor's degree in physical education. And a lot of times they'll have some sort of adapted PE concentration as well. So working with both groups of students to, just enhance their knowledge of working with kids with disabilities. But one common thread, I guess I would say, that encompasses both groups of students, whether they're a first-year college student or in graduate school, is I always hit home the law and making sure that students understand the why behind adapted physical education, and that we're not just the alternative for kids with disabilities when it comes to PE.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know for me, like I never had an interaction with a kid or really an adult with disabilities until my professor, Dr. Sutar, if you know her, pulled me into bike camp. I had a whole thing where I had to switch my health and PE major to just PE and adapted PE, and she invited me to bike camp, and I just was sucked in. Like, that was it. I was adapted PE teacher during that time. That's how I knew. But how would you give basic strategies or simple ways that you've taught the future teachers you prepare at UW La Crosse to advocate for students with disabilities in physical education?
So, similar to what we were talking about with Garth, you can't advocate if you don't know the law, especially in regards to adapted physical education. And this is something that I learned from Garth as a former student of his, and something that I've done my best to continue, again, both in our undergraduate and graduate programs, is making sure that all of our students have a solid understanding of the law and what IDEA says regarding physical education for students with disabilities. It's because it goes beyond just reading what IDEA says. It's understanding the letters of clarification. It's understanding that there are dear colleague letters that are even out there. Again, many students will graduate without knowing that these letters exist or these documents exist. And, again, that's one thing that I built off from what Garth done, and what I do now is I make sure that my students have a packet of this information, and I've continued the name, and Garth called it his parent packet. And
love it.
That's what we use. And I've added to it over the years, and now we're up to probably, 10 to 12 documents, over 100 pages. It is a little lengthy, but it's all information that our students need to know. And, additionally, in regards to the law, our students need to know that adapted physical education is a service, not a placement. It's not just a class that kids are placed into. Understanding what the least restrictive environment is, and making sure that students are educated in the most appropriate setting fit to their needs, which again is why we call it an IEP, an individualized education plan, and not just an education plan. And so it should be individualized. And so their educational placements should be specifically tailored to fit their needs. We also go into detail with our students on screening and eligibility and the whole assessment process, and making sure that teachers know that, you don't just use the TGMD3 to determine eligibility for adapted PE in your students. It's not just one assessment. It's not just one observation that you use. You need to have multiple sources of information, repeated observations to determine, does the student have a specific educational need? And then we also talk about the rights that students with disabilities are afforded when it comes to extracurricular sports and athletics. And that's where we can get into a Dear Colleague letter that was issued probably about 10 or 12 years ago, further reiterating, the rights that students with disabilities have in regards to extracurricular sports. And then this started with Garth probably, and maybe he can clarify, about 10 or 12 years ago, but we've also continued a partnership with our Wisconsin Facets or Parent Center, our federally funded parent center here in Wisconsin. Those of you in Minnesota, if you're listening, it would be the Pacer Center over there.
Yes, we have Pacer.
But our Wisconsin group, they provide trainings for special education families, related to the services, and provide assistance to families and professionals regarding students with disabilities. And, we've provided an adapted PE specific webinar for them as part of their webinar series every year. And that's how, like I mentioned in my introduction, that I've gotten connected with a number of school districts around the state to go and provide in-services and different resources to them and their teachers regarding adapted PE service delivery.
Yeah, there's so much to this, as you guys know. There's so much to this advocacy, because there's so much related to the legal aspects of special education. Remember, there are lawyers that make their living. There are thousands of lawyers that make their living in this just one area. And Brock mentions again about the parents. I'm hoping that all adapted PE teachers, no matter what state you're in, you're contacting your parent center. And again, Jen, you have actually, in my estimation, the best parent center in the country. Now, we might have the second best, but Pacer Center is unbelievable. I've worked with a few parents in different states. They can't contact. They can't figure out, and it's not that their fault, but their parent centers in their state just don't do the things that Facet in Wisconsin and Pacer Center in Minnesota do. And again, this advocacy stuff never ends. It's constant. We're all learning. Every month, Brock and we read what's called the Special Education Law Monthly. And it's a summary of courses, a summary of cases all over the country. And everything is brand new all the time. So it's professional development that just continues.
Yes. So, Brock, I want to get into some of the teacher preparation and also some of the hacks, down the road here at the end of our podcast. But I love this question because, we were all first year teachers once. But what are some of your things that your first year rookie teachers come back to you and say, oh, man, that was so hard when it comes to working with students with disabilities? What are some of those things they come back and be like, dude, I wish you would have taught us. I was not prepared. Tell us a little bit about those things.
Yeah, I'll probably tell you the thing that comes back to me most, and this is one thing that I wish I could teach students, but I just can't. And that's how to develop your teaching schedule when you're at 2, 3, or 4 buildings over the course of a week. Absolutely. And it's one of those things where, we've worked with our student teachers to, when they're doing their field placements and their student teaching, to spend a full day or multiple days a week with your adapted PE teacher and that adapted PE placement. So you can at least understand what it's like to go to one school for maybe an hour or two, and then go to another school, and then maybe back to that other school, and then to a third school in the afternoon. So that's probably the one thing that, again, that students come back to me and be like, how do I do this? And it's like, I wish I could teach you, but it's so specific to the school district, so specific to the, to the specific schools that you're at. But one thing that I tell them is you need to collaborate and you need to communicate with your physical education, with the general physical education teachers, but also with the building principals, because they're the ones that develop the schedule for the school. They're the ones that determine when these kids go to their specials. And if you know you have 3 kids at this school in maybe kindergarten or first grade that need a small group motor team, well, maybe you can schedule your time to be at that school all at one time, communicate that with the principal, so that way you don't have to go to that school 2 different times in one day. I mean, you just have to be open and honest with the people that develop your schedule, the people that you're working with, maybe in the physical education classroom, to know this schedule works or this schedule doesn't work. Because, one thing that's also important for first year teachers is you need to know the IEP. And so when you're scheduling this time, you need to make sure that you're meeting the appropriate minutes that these students have specified. And are these minutes being done and taught in the specific setting? Because maybe they can't be successful in the inclusive or integrated setting, and they have to do more of a pull-out or small group. And so these students have to know and understand the IEP. And one thing that I tell them, when you're in your first year and even into your second or third, you're going to have to rely on your other coworkers at the school, because they're going to know those students better than you. And you can't be afraid to ask. You can't be afraid to talk to them and ask questions. And
I think I'm going to jump forward, because this was totally like one of the things that I wanted to talk about too. So I'm so glad that you brought this up. It's into our little hacks that I was going to talk about. Like, scheduling is so hard, but I want to share my process. Okay. So this is my 15th year going into 16th. If you are a new teacher, one thing that I've suggested is that one of the first things you do when you get into your school district is that you email all the case managers and say, hello, my name is Jen Hebink. I'm the new DAPE teacher. In Minnesota, we call it DAPE, adapted PE teacher. Here's a headshot of what I look like. If you have any students that receive DAPE services, please allow me to view and edit, or it would just be view the IEP, so I can see all of their service minutes. That's literally the first thing I do. Even as a 16th year teacher, I'm emailing and be like, hey, if you have any kids, I just need to have access, because like you said, we need to go through the IEP. We need to look at their eval and see what kind of notes, what kind of medical situations we have. And so what I do, this is my hack. Ready for it? So I create a Excel sheet, and I have the kid's name in a column. The next column is their case manager, because that's what I can see really, really quick. I then have their grade, and then I have their evaluation date. I have their meeting date. I have their next evaluation, so I can see how many evaluations I'm going to have to do that year, right? And then I look into their services. So if they are small group twice a week or whatever, I'm putting that in the service area of that Excel graph or Excel sheet. So then from there, I can kind of go into their schedule and see where they're open. If they have a resource, I'm at a secondary level, right? So they have a resource time or a time that works for them. And I'm starting to piece together those pieces. I'm only at 2 schools. It is hard, even at 2 schools, right? But I feel like once I have that Excel sheet of all that information, I know who to contact. I know what services they receive. It makes it a little bit easier to organize their stuff for their services.
Yeah, and one thing that I think our students need to have a little bit of, even if it might not be their personality, but is that type A planning.
A little bit,
mindset. Because, especially if you're going to be at, you mentioned 2 schools is a little bit of a challenge. But if you're at any more than 2 and you're at 3, even 4 schools, and a lot of locally, a handful of elementary adapted PE teachers are going to 3, sometimes 4 schools throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was a little bit of a shock for our students, we had a very strong graduate from our program about 3 or 4 years ago, very type A personality. But I brought her in towards the end of her first year to speak to our graduate students. And she brought in something very similar that you're talking about, Jen, her schedule and how she plans. But more so about how she plans her schedule, it was, and again, this is another challenge that students face, is progress monitoring and data tracking. And making sure that you're keeping track of all of your assessment data. And, it to really do it well, it does require you to just about at the end of every day, write down your notes about what happened in class with your students. And because otherwise, one thing that I always tell my students, whether they're general PE or adapted PE classes, specifically in regards to assessment, many of us being sport oriented and watching kids move and do these things every day for year to year, we're like, oh, that I'll remember how that kid performed. I'll remember what they did or didn't do. But when you have a class of, or a caseload, let's say, of 40 to 45 students, if you're an adapted PE teacher or you're a general PE teacher and you have, 5 or 6 classes a day of 15 to 20 students, you're not going to remember how every student did and performed. And so go ahead, Garth.
One quick one, Jen, and I'll let you expand on this, Jen. What I hear, or what I often would have heard was, I didn't realize I needed to prepare and supervise and evaluate my para-educator. It was just such a new thing for them. And Jen, I'm sure you've had a lot of experience in that.
Yes. Okay. So the whole progress reporting, and then also, so first of all, let's hit that progress reporting piece. I don't know any adapted PE teacher who's like amazing at it. Like we get so sucked into our teaching sometimes because we're good at it. But I've had to work in my own career over and over and over, like, how do I get better at this? How do I get better at this? And so my little thing that I do at the middle school is I just have a binder and I have a place where I can just take a short note on every single kid every single day. So whenever I see him or her or them, I write the date and I have their goal right next to, like, did I address the goal? How did he do? Like, I just do like a sentence or two. So at least I have like some data, because it's hard. It's really hard, but I have it organized by period, grade. So that's that. But, and then Garth, what was the other thing? Oh, paras.
Para-educator preparation.
Yes. What I've found is that the more that I can get to chat with the para ahead of time before the general PE class, before the adapted PE class, and say, these are your expectations. And I also tell the general PE teacher, these are the expectations of the para, because paras like to sit back and relax sometimes.
No,
that's not really what we want them to do, right? We have amazing, incredible paras who sometimes just need to be told what the expectation is for their kid and how they can help the kid be successful. Are they prompting them? Are they redirecting them? Are they recording for them?
I have a world of respect for all paraeducators. Believe me.
Oh, yes.
They are important colleagues. And right now, to this day, as a school bus driver, I could not do it safely without paraeducators helping me.
Yes. Yes.
And the other thing too about paraeducators is I've worked with and seen a number of very good ones, some hands-on in there with the kids, getting their hands dirty per se within the lesson. But one thing that we need to be able to do as the physical educator, the adapted physical educator, is, they may not know what we're doing in class. So again, meeting with them beforehand to understand, okay, this is the purpose of this activity. This is the goal of this activity. And here are a few, again, probably no more than 2 or 3, but some teaching tips, some teaching cues for this content, because when we have to remember that these paraprofessionals are coming from music, art, to us in PE, then going to classroom topics. And they're inundated with different academic language from a variety of disciplines. And they may not know physical education, and that's fine.
Yep.
But we need to do our best to prompt them, to give them, again, like I said, those teaching cues, those teaching tips to help out their kids.
And we have to remember that their physical education experience when they were in high school and they're in elementary school looks a lot different than what we expect from today.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So I want to wrap up this part of the podcast, but Brock, I don't want to leave us without asking you about your other passion, which is adapted sports. Can you just share a little bit more about why you think adapted sport is so important? and how that impacts both students with and without disabilities.
Yeah. I mean, I'll try to do my best to speak to this briefly.
Yeah.
But adaptive sport, really, I became aware of it when I started working here about 7-8 years ago. And the La Crosse area, the 4 local high schools here in La Crosse, the Logan, Central, and La Crosse, Holman, and Onalaska, started an adapted sport league for kids with disabilities probably about 13 or so years ago, in about 2011, 2012. And, this all came from, I will mention the Dear Colleague letter that Garth talked about, but the Dear Colleague letter that talked about how students with disabilities need to be afforded the same opportunities to participate in extracurricular sports as their non-disabled peers. And, we need to be giving them, students with disabilities, opportunities to participate in the general sport setting for extracurricular sports. But we know that there are kids with disabilities that just aren't going to be successful in that type of environment. And if that's the case, then we need to provide alternatives and options for them. And that's where the schools around here put together, a group, essentially a mini conference for these schools to participate and play against each other. So it gives these students with disabilities an opportunity to be social, but also competitive amongst their peers, but also in a setting where things are equal, things are fair, and they're not competing against, they're not playing on Friday night at 7:00 in front of 1,000 people in their high school gym. I mean, yes, they're playing in front of parents, family, and friends, but it's in a setting, it's in an environment that's, more suited to them and their needs. But to build on that a little bit, a lot of my doctoral research was in sport coaching, and I've continued to do that coaching research now with adapted sport coaches. And one thing that I've learned with talking with a number of sport coaches, adapted sport coaches around the state in the last few months, is that there is obviously a unique background to all these coaches. Some of them had very strong sport backgrounds, some of them didn't. But one thing that I've learned about the students and their adapted sport experience is that there is a unique balance with these coaches with regards to giving the students a fun and social opportunity, but also the need to be competitive and wanting to win. And some coaches have a different balance. You could look at it as it's not quite 50-50, but some coaches have maybe like kind of a 70%, we want to win and be competitive, and then a 30% let's be social and have fun, whereas others might have, something closer to 60-40 of social and being competitive. But one thing that's unique to me about that is when you look at some of the research in regards to students with disabilities and their participation in integrated or inclusive physical education classes where they're in there with their peers, is many times the students with disability and their hands-on experience will be less than ideal, and it won't be a great experience for them. And so giving these students an opportunity to be active and competitive in an environment that suits them and their needs is very unique and something that's not necessarily done too much at the high school level. If you look around the country, I know Minnesota has a very strong and historic adapted sport group, but many other states that have some sort of adapted sport opportunities oftentimes do it in a more maybe unified setting where you have kids with and without disabilities competing together. And you're not giving the kids with disabilities the opportunity to shine on their own, to show what they're capable of. And so looking at adapted sport as really an avenue for advocacy, but also in regards to independence and seeing what these kids can do as human beings and seeing that they're more than just what we might think that they are.
Yes, absolutely. And I know my friend and teacher of the year, sister Sadie, if you know Sadie, Sadie. I know she works so hard on that Sun Prairie inner school. What is it called? Just their little
the adapted sports league. Brock and I refereed some of her games.
No way! That's awesome. Oh yeah. So, but yeah, and the Minnesota State High School League is wonderful. And Unified has its place. I think everybody can have their thing, but definitely like the Minnesota State High School League has been really great for us. So here's one of my favorite places in the podcast. We're going to be wrapping up in a minute, but I want to know what your guys' takeaways have been from this podcast that we've been talking. If there's something that somebody said or things that you're like, man, that was really cool. I'm taking that today. I always ask kids about what they're taking away from what they're learning. So let's take our takeaways. Garth, what's your takeaway from today?
You know, my takeaway was I was feeling guilty that we were going to be talking about advocacy again, but I found that advocacy was a theme throughout everyone's comments and just about all of the content. There's no getting away from it. You know, it's adapted physical educators are advocates and educators. It's beyond just teaching. Part of the role is to be an advocate, and that translates into educating based on the information and knowledge that you have. Don't be afraid to do it. You might be a first-year teacher out there, you know, diplomatically educating a person who's been teaching 20 years and maybe a principal, maybe an administrator. Feel comfortable doing it. Take your time doing it. Talk to other experienced persons like all of us. Don't hesitate to contact us, but it's an important part of what you do. Accept the role, accept the challenge, and continue to learn.
Yes. Thanks, Garth. How about you, Brock?
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that I'm thinking as we're talking here and what Garth just mentioned, especially in regards to advocacy and the knowledge that is needed to be successful and do well, it makes me want to go and look at all of our adaptive PE classes to making sure that we're really focusing on and emphasizing what needs to be done and what students need to know to be a successful teacher, both in regards to their actual teaching skills, but also their knowledge in regards to the law, advocacy, whether it be adapted sport, eligibility for adapted PE. There are so many areas that the profession needs to know and needs to understand. So one of my takeaways is making sure that as a director of undergraduate and graduate programs that that my students are coming out of our program prepared to face some of the sometimes headwinds that they're going to face as a future teacher.
Yes. So good. Both you guys, thank you for sharing your takeaways. I was thinking about what we talked about today, and I just continue to think that like advocacy is tough work. If no one speaks up, what happens? We lose stuff. Our kids don't get the best stuff, right? And I almost wish, like, as a first year teacher, I'm like, I wish there was like, I know we learn about the law, but like when I was in school, I didn't know how to have the confidence to speak up. And so I feel like in talking with you guys, it has just reminded me of how far I've come as an adapted PE teacher, being able to speak up, advocating for my kids' needs, figuring out the little tools to help me collect data better, to get the services and schedule figured out. So it really just has made me reflect on like how far I've come in my growth as a teacher since a first year teacher. So I really thank you guys for coming on today and just sharing your hearts and sharing what you do every day. And I'm just reminded one of the lessons that I teach my kids when it comes to advocacy is that advocacy is really just advocacy is education. Education is advocacy. Advocacy is education. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'm just going to talk through how we can. I'm gonna talk about what's coming on the podcast, so you guys can just hang out and just relax for a minute. But I want to introduce our next guest for September, and she is 2025 Shape America High School Teacher of the Year, Lisa Smith. Lisa and I have known each other for a while, and we've gone through a lot together. And she's going to share a little bit about her story and how students with disabilities have shaped her teaching and grown her as a teacher as well. So I'm excited to have her on this show. And then thank you again, Garth and Brock, for joining us. Thank you to our listeners. We did have a couple people joining us live watching. I do have that little satin ticker up in my window. So we did have a couple people watching live. So if that's you, thanks for joining us today. Another thank you to Fit and Fun Playscapes. There are 26 sponsors for this podcast year. Again, you can find them on X. And then in order to follow us or find us on social media, you can go on X and find us at Heartbeats of Adapted PE. You can find us on Blue Sky at Heartbeats of APE at BSKY, bluesky.social. Or you can always just email us at heartbeatsofadaptedpe@gmail.com. We always go live on our YouTube page at Heartbeats of Adapted PE Podcast, but you can also catch us on the Health and Physical Education Collective. So if you're over there, it's like X or Twitter without the noise. And there was a live event there as we were streaming in that direction as well. And then Shape America also hosts this podcast. And so they've been posting and advertising this podcast for episode 5 as well. We're working on dropping some more episodes on Spotify and Apple, but right now we have one episode up there, our opening episode, and more to come on those. We're working really hard to get those done for you all. But other than that, this has just been a great time with you guys. So thank you so much for joining us, and join us for episode 6 with Lisa Smith in September. Thanks so much, everybody.